I want to start this video by asking you a rhetorical question. What would you say is the worst type of enemy to have? When I left my ex-husband, and in November it will be 2 years. After that, even though we'd been together for 21 years, he openly declared me to be an enemy. So he started to harass me and stalk me and be threatening and make demands, because he, in his mind, I was not giving him back on the investment of time and energy that he had put into me, in his thinking. And because I was making a choice for myself that was inconvenient to him, he became very angry. And I think there were a lot of other reasons as well, but the switching into enemy mode is very common for a person who displays a lot of narcissistic traits, that is low on empathy, very egocentric and exploitative. Usually when you choose to end the relationship, they become angry because you are then making a decision that they don't have any control over. And what usually happens is that they try to hurt you in different ways, and most common is the smear campaign. So they will talk badly about you and lie and accuse you of things, so smearing your reputation. But that is an open enemy. So now they are openly showing aggression and but during the relationship, I would say that they are also your enemy, because they are in many ways hurting you, taking advantage of you, trying to make you weak, trying to hurt you mentally, and perhaps the worst form of the behavior that they display and that they I think the worst form of abuse is the gaslighting. So making you insecure, making you doubt your ability to take decisions and your memory and your ability to interpret the world. Because in the end of my relationship, and for at least the first year, I felt very lost and very uncertain about if I were to make a decision. It took a lot of thinking and effort and questioning myself, and I was feeling very worthless and unable. I almost felt like I wasn't an adult anymore, because he oppressed me and controlled me a lot. And made me constantly reminded me of mistakes I'd made, and talked down to me and told me that you better ask me beforehand so you don't make another stupid mistake again. And I started to believe that, even though I recognized that he was unstable, this was a part that sort of sneaked past my awareness. So, and also the confusion of what was really happening. What was I seeing, and what did it mean, and what was he doing? Was he betraying me, or was he, as you said, completely devoted and love me eternally? This is beginning to become much clearer because I remove myself from that environment. But having a person who is your enemy but is doing it in secret in the relationship with you, like gaining your trust, and as soon as they get an opportunity to jab you emotionally, they grab it and try to break you down and control you and making you get used to abuse. I would say that that's much worse than having a open enemy like the person becomes after you leave them. Even though it feels scarier, so after I left, it did feel a lot scarier. I was afraid that he would find us and that he would hurt us, because that's what he had tried to do, and that's what he was threatening to do. So I was much more scared of him after I left. And the strange thing was that even though he was actually behaving in these ways when I was in the relationship, because it sort of felt like I had a control over the situation when I was in it. So, well, when I was in it, I could calm his moods and see what he was up to and read his moods and try to prevent the blow-ups and keep him like decently calm most of the time. So giving that control up, even though that was not real control. I couldn't, even how much I tried, I couldn't stop him from abusing me and from escalating the abuse and from hurting me. So, but it was an illusion of having control over the situation. At least I could overview the situation and I saw him. So it felt scarier when I couldn't see him, but I knew that he was threatening us and following us, and like he had escalated the abuse a lot before I left. So if he was that bad while I was in it, like how would it be? How would it be when I really left? So I was very scared. Let's see where you can sit and watch me. I'm picking lingonberries, so and some blueberries, but mostly lingonberries. It's a Swedish berry, and you can make a jam from it. I'll show you. Let's see, you can see it there. And like they're very sour if you would eat them. Oh, there was a blueberry in there. They're quite sour if you eat them just like this. But if you boil them with some sugar, then it becomes this lingonberry jam, and it's like sweet and sour, and you can use it for meat dishes. Or so this is the fall, and it is the harvest time. And even if you are not growing anything yourself, there is like in the forest and in nature there are berries and herbs and fruit, depending on where you live, in which country, in which part of the world, there will be different things. But in the old days, before humans started to farm, we were hunters and gatherers. So like it's a very old tradition, especially for the females, because they will usually stay a bit closer to home and kids, that we gather. And So, and I also find it a bit meditative and peaceful to be out here in the woods. But this is something that is becoming a bit forgotten. Like, we buy things from the store now, and gathering and harvesting by ourselves. Many of us don't do this anymore. Let's see. Oh, it's a bit tricky to find a place to place you sometimes. There, among the lingonberry leaves. there they are. But we are getting further away from our roots and from the traditional way of living, where you actually had to gather at the fall to sustain yourself during the winter. And it's a good hobby because if you can gather quite a bit of, you can have some stuff in your freezer, and depending on how you if you freeze them or dry them, or if you boil them to jam, you can have a bit of a stock. So it's free. There's a lot of things growing here in the forest, and if no one is picking them, then it's just left for the animals, or left eventually to rot or freeze on the plants. So, but when it comes to abuse, we are also getting far away from our roots. So in the old days, there were punishments, like if you lied and stole and tricked persons, and if you seduced the young ladies or the married people, then there were punishments. So, and often they were quite horrible or corporal punishments, and sometimes the worst, or one of the worst or most feared punishment, was to be exiled from your community. But this isn't something that we do, and even not that long ago, there were more outbursts, moral outrage if you were to behave in these ways. Then it will be very, very hard to redeem your reputation. But nowadays it's just common. It's so common that we just shrug our shoulders, and well, I guess that's just how people are. If you don't have boundaries, and they, like the victim, should have picked better. They weren't very smart to be with that person. So there is no punishment, no social punishment, and often there is no legal punishment. And I don't think that, the punishment thing, I don't think it's actually, it doesn't have to do with religion precisely. It's a theme that repeats itself, through different cultures and different religions, that if you behave in a way that is very destructive for your fellow humans, then they will try to punish you, so you learn to not do it again, and perhaps they don't want you to be part of their village. Let's go a bit further. Picked all the berries at that place. See, there are a lot of berries all over, but you should be able to stand as well to pick. So let's see if we find a place over here. In the Nordic countries, or in Sweden at least, even before Christianity, there were a term for, and these were usually men, I guess, because men had more freedom to move around more than women. But if you broke like the moral codes, if you did like the adultery, or if you hurt, like if you killed someone, even if it wasn't intentional, if you hurt them like without taking them to the primitive court, then you would be sentenced as a outlaw. And in Swedish it was called niding, like he's sentenced to become a niding. And then the person who is this outcast, they can't stay anymore with their people, and anyone who comes across this man, like he's can kill him. So his life no longer has any value. He has been deemed to be an outcast and without any moral and honor. And well, that's very, very harsh. And I don't think that we should go back to any kind of corporal punishment or even this to exile people. But it puts things in a perspective. Like people who lived back in the days, they have to take the abuse more seriously, because you were living in an environment where you actually struggled to stay alive. You needed to gather the berries, and I know, even in my parents' generation, the young kid, when my parents were young, at least my mom, not sure about my father, he grew up on a farm, so perhaps the picking of berries wasn't that big of that large part of life for him. But I knew that my mother was sent out to pick berries in the forest every day during this season when the berries are when they are ready for cooking, when they are ripe, that's the name. So she couldn't come home, or she couldn't go play, I think, before she had the 2 baskets full. One should be with lingonberries, the red berries that I'm picking, and one with blueberries, because that was important for the family to survive. During the winter. So if you are living in that type of environment, and I know also that it wasn't that long ago that the common food for the family was sometimes you would just have potatoes, and perhaps it was a fish that was either dried or smoked, or it was put in some sort of sour fluid or salted. Yes. So the normal food was very sparse, and they didn't live in this surplus that many of us in the industrial nations do. So if you were then, when you're living on this edge and you are actually, it's a matter of life and death if you are healthy, if you're able to work. This is the reason behind why they fed, if you read some history or learn about how people lived back then you will see that, the kids were fed first the father, and then the grown sons, and then the mother, and then in the end they fed the small children. And this was actually like not because of rank, it was more because of the fact that they needed to feed the persons who were working, like the breadwinners. They were breadwinners and they weren't like paid. Well, later on they were paid, but they needed those people to have energy to be able to go to work the next day. And it was usually harsh work, like physical work, for physical labor, or like long working hours. And like I had my grandfather's father was a woodworker, among other things. Like he had a lot of different jobs, but he worked with, like in the forest, they were taking down the trees and taking them to the like transporting them to be I think they first dry the wood and then they cut it up to become planks. So it was very harsh work. And like he died, that my grandfather's great grandfather, that's how you say it, he passed away when I was, I think, around 6 or 7. And I don't have that lot of memories from him. He wasn't like living in a retirement home and he had a stroke. But I do remember like I felt a bit icky when I was sitting on his lap, because on one hand he had, like he was missing 3 fingers. I think the little and the ring finger and the middle finger, if I remember correctly, they were like he had accidentally, like there was an accident when they were sawing the wood and he had cut those fingers off. So it was harsh. And if you were to get an injury or a handicap or an illness, then like there was no social system like we have now. Like there was no one to step in and take care of you, and like no doctor to put you on sick leave. You were like, perhaps you were like could go to beg for some food, or you were put on some, like perhaps you could get some food from the village, but it was harsh. And so if then there comes a narcissist and an abuser and someone who tricks you and manipulates you and like steals your assets and lie, then this was a very, very serious issue. And I think that a lot of our stories, like the old fairy tales, they didn't have the term narcissist, wasn't a term, but they did warn about people taking advantage of you. And like Red Riding Hood, she's like not going on the right path to grandma, and then when she gets there, then she is tricked by the wolf. And I mean, it sounds like a harsh story, and in modern times we want to censor it in some schools, or we don't tell those type of stories anymore. There is another, like Hans and Gretel, where the evil, selfish, unempathic, scheming stepmother like actually convinces her husband to leave the kids, Hansel and Gretchen, in the woods. And there is the story of Snow White. Like all of these classical stories, the ones that were told, I think, well, I'm not sure if this was a Brother Grimm story. Not sure. But they collected like old German stories, I think. And like it's uncertain how long these stories have been circulating and around, but obviously they survived because they were warning about something important, and they were telling how certain people will behave, like the stepmother in Snow White. She is jealous of Snow White because Snow White is more beautiful than her, and she actually hires a hunter to kill her, but the hunter feels pity for the girl, so he doesn't kill her. I think he kills a deer or something, and then he shows the lungs and the liver to the stepmother so that she will believe that Snow White is dead. And he tells Snow White that, or I can't remember if perhaps she is the one who is offering, like, please save my life and I will just disappear and go away and no one will know. But that's how she ends up with the 7 dwarfs. And like when the stepmother finds out, because, you know, now Cinderella is her enemy, then she comes, like he seeks Cinderella out, and she disguises herself. So she is a shapeshifter, you can say. And she brings her apple, like, and she disguises herself to this very sweet and lovely lady. And well, I think she comes 3 times, right? So she is disguising herself as different types of sweet ladies. Actually, like trying to hoover Cinderella, but or stalking her, or trying to kill her. I think one time with a comb, and then one time with a hairband. And they are poisonous, but when the dwarfs come home and find her asleep, they realize that something is wrong, and they remove these poisonous objects, and Cinderella is like, she wakes up. So yeah, and in the end she comes with this apple that looks very sweet, and she wants to give her the apple. And Cinderella is now wise because she has been tricked twice by a sweet old lady. So she is very hesitant to take the apple, but the old lady takes a bite from one side. Like, the apple has 2 sides, so she takes a bite from one side, and she says that, well, if it was poisonous then I wouldn't eat it, so take a bite. And she does, and chokes on the poisonous apple, and then she's, in the story, like, she will sleep an eternal sleep, I think. I'm not sure if she wakes up. Yeah, the prince comes, like, in the end, he comes and sees her in the casket and takes her away. But there are some interpretations that say that the prince is like Cinderella is actually dead, and he's taking her away, like, to a better place. So, like, imagine the kind of time where, like, who would even eat an apple that was bitten by an old lady nowadays? Like, would you accept it? But in those times, it was, you were tempted because there was a lack of food, and like, you were surviving, and if someone gave you an apple, even if they had bitten a piece, then you would take it. So it was a different time. But this story is also warning about, like, a manipulative and selfish person who is hurting and abusing, lying and shape-shifting. So Yes. And then there is, like, for the last period, the last, perhaps the last 2 years of my marriage, I realized that I didn't fully comprehend how bad it was because I was still in it. So it's very hard to see. It's like you are in a swamp or in a lake, and it's hard to tell, like, really how wet you are before, like, how wet are your clothes before you get up, and like before you transit to normal, like you don't start to shiver before you get inside. If you have been cold, for example, if you got hypothermia, you don't realize that you are being, like, you are losing body temperature. So when people get lost, they are normally found with very little clothes on because the body, like, you don't feel the cold anymore. So it's a bit of a mind trick, but that happens to a lot of things. Like when you get adapted, like when you are in pain, then you don't feel how much pain you are in before it, like when it goes away, then you really feel the difference. Or when you're tired and then it goes away, then you really feel the difference. And when you are being abused and oppressed and controlled and constantly on edge, then you don't really feel, like when I'd been like that for so many years, it's hard to really feel the difference before you're out. But the last years, I knew that I was being mistreated, and I knew that he was abusive, or, well, perhaps I didn't call it abuse, but I knew that he was unstable and selfish and that he lacked morals. So, but I thought that, even though I knew that, I still believed, like, I also believed in the part that he showed me sometimes, like, well, sometimes, like, he has a sweet side, he has a sweet inner core, but he's hurt and he's, like, emotionally immature. So I have kind of become his mother figure, and that wasn't what I planned, but, well, now I have kids with this man, and, like, leaving would cause more damage than staying, or so I thought. Well, that was how I reasoned, but I did see his misbehavior. But actually, like, when there were so many things that made me leave, but one of the things were me reflecting on this Norse, like, there is an old Norse myth, and I will share it with you because it's actually like an old myth, the oldest I have read about someone who is narcissistic, and about their fate. And I think there's a lesson here, so let's hear it. Let's talk about it. So before Christianity, the Nordic countries were, like, they believed in the Norse gods. So and there were several, like, they were had several deities, but these, and there were a lot of stories about the gods, and but one of the gods were actually, I think he was a half god, like he was half god and half giant. I think his mother was a giantess, but his name was Loki, and he was a trickster. He was the trickster god, and like he was a bit clever in his way, and he was also a shapeshifter, so he could change his shape. And like in one of the stories, like it's a fairy tale, but it's a fairy tale about a person who can shift their identity or like seem to be someone else. He actually turns into, I think he's turned, if I remember correctly, he turns himself into a horse, and then I can't remember who he is intimate with. But anyway, like the offspring, so he turns himself into a female horse. And then he is intimate with someone. I can't remember if it's a god. And like he tricked that person into being intimate with him. And then he gives birth to like a 8-legged horse, who is also like featured in some of the mythology. But as I said, like he's a trickster. He likes to play pranks on people. Oh, here are a lot of blueberries. But like as time goes on, he takes it further and further. So, and like eventually one of his pranks actually ends up killing one of the guards. So he tricks this god into a position where he loses his life. And then the god meets. So they're really fed up with Loki and with his tricks and like how he lies and cheats. And so they decide that they will exile him. That's the proper punishment. And he is exiled to the underworld. And they are actually, so this is another, like you say, it's a horrific punishment. They take his son, like one of Loki's sons, and then they kill him and take out his bowels, and they tie Loki up with his son's bowel, so he can't move his hands and I guess legs. So he's lying like defenseless and bound. And then they take this poisonous snake and they put it like over him, so that the snake like is laying there with its mouth open, and the poison is like blue hand. The poison is dripping down on Loki, like on his body and face. And this poison is like burning his skin. So every time that happens, he like squirms, like he yells and twists in pain to get away from the poison. So this was his punishment. But here's the twister. Because Loki had a faithful wife. And her name was Sigyn, and she loved him. And she decided to accompany him to the underworld. Like, even though he had behaved so poorly and done so much harm, she decided to stay with him. And so in the story, she still stands over Loki, and she's holding up this bowl, like between Loki and the snake. And in that bowl, she catches the snake's venom so that it doesn't drip on her husband. So she's standing there, like basically wasting her, like using her life to protect him from the consequences and the punishment of his actions. And Oh, and every time she has, sometimes she has to empty the bowl when it gets full. So she has to go, I think there are in the cave, and she has to go outside of the cave and empty the bowl. And when that happens, Loki is in so much pain that he is like pulling on the things that are binding him and twisting. And that's like why the earthquake happens here on Earth. So that's the myth. But before I left, I don't know how I came across this myth again. Like, this is something that we studied like in school when I was young. Like, it's part of the history. So I guess I read it when I was younger, but I had forgotten this specific story, and then I came across it. And that story just, like, it didn't leave me. I was thinking about this story, like this old myth, like 3,000 years old. I don't know how old it is, but that's a guess. I don't know. I don't know how. Perhaps not Sweden was christened. How do you say? We were changed into Christianity like around year 1000. So this story is older than that. But there was something in it, like some sort of wisdom. And it took me a while to figure it out. Like, why can't I stop thinking about this? But I was actually being Sigyn. So when I was staying with my ex-husband, I was protecting him from his consequences. Like, he was unemployed since 10 years. But I was protecting him from the consequences of being unemployed because I let him control my salary and he used my salary. So he was spared, like he was protected from that drip of poison. And he was a liar and like he was cheating on me. And I knew that he had done it a few times, but I wasn't, like at that time, I wasn't really sure if he really, like, I guess I was in denial, but he was cheating on me the whole time. And like, he couldn't maintain a normal relationship. But I was sparing him from that consequence by choosing to stay with him, like stay being his wife, even though he wasn't being a husband. And he couldn't treat the kids properly, so he wasn't able to like treat them in a balanced way. Like, he wasn't able to do the everyday things. Like, he avoided them on everyday occasions. So he just took them out on weekends, and then he shopped to them. Like, he went to the Funland and bought them ice cream and candy, like all for my money. And then he felt like super dad. And everyone, he would come home and tell me how everyone was admiring him because he was so involved with his kids at the Funland. Like, the other parents are just sitting there with their phones, like, but I am so involved, and I even played football with them. Like, he was, because he was then putting on this show for strange people. So he was, but I took all the everyday chores and the school runs and cooking and cleaning, like everything that you have to do as a parent. I took care of that. And then he could feel like super dad. Like, so I protected him from the consequences of not treating your kids as you should. So I was protecting him from so much. And also, like, I was keeping his reputation. Like he still felt. He would tell people like, oh, my wife is a doctor, so then they would, and he tricked me into buying an apartment, and he would tell them that it was his apartment that was fixed. Like, so he created this illusion like he had some money, or like he wasn't a failure, and he would not be honest with people. Like, I don't know what kind of lies he really told, but me staying with him, it was exactly like Sigyn choosing to stay with Loki and standing over him and protecting him. And I also realized that as long as I'm standing here, he won't, like, as long as I'm staying with him, he won't feel the consequences of the choices he makes in his life. So, like, why am I staying? It's not for my sake. Like, I am in pain, and it's not for his sake. Like, if I'm staying, he will never have, like, he won't have any chance to change. Perhaps if I leave, like, he will feel the sting and the pain, and he will, like, there is a small, I don't think that he will ever change, but there is at least like the small chance that he might reflect and seek some help. But more than that, like, it's not only, and then it was the kids, so I realized that like staying is not good for them. It's actually like staying will be choosing to perpetuating the cycle of this toxicity, and I don't want to be part of that. But staying would also be staying with a person who is treating me like an enemy, but calling it sweet. So they're offering me the sweet apple, but it's really poisonous. He's saying that he loves me more than anything, but he cheats on me and steals my money, tricks me and lies. And so it basically comes down to survival, even though we're not living in, no longer in a world where we will starve to death. We are living in a world where people are like mentally starving to death, or mentally breaking down and becoming ill, or depressed or burned out. So, and I was becoming burnt out, and I had this feeling in my body for like a few years. Like after the kids were born, I kept feeling in my body that like my body won't be able to take this. I will get sick. I got this feeling like it kept returning in different periods, but like this is not sustainable. I need to make a change, but I felt so stuck that I couldn't see what the change would be. And in the beginning, I didn't realize that I was feeling like this because I was living with a person who abused me. So my answer to the question, like, who is the worst enemy? It would be the enemy who is sleeping next to you, who is pretending to share life with you when they are actually stealing life from you. They are stealing your like feeling of being valuable and the joy that you like. Why should you suffer every day? Why should every day be so hard? So you just have to like grit your teeth and get through it. Like, we're no longer living in the days where like it's a blessing that we don't have to be afraid to starve to death or be afraid to get an illness and there are no antibiotics. So like there is an abundance, even if you are like, even if we have a bit of a poor financial situation. And like, actually, I'm not trying to demean anyone who has like less financial means. But even if you do, like, there should be joy. Like, even if you don't have that much money, you should be able to go home, like to your home, and have a peaceful evening, sit with your family and talk and share about your day or laugh together. Like, these things are free, so why should you not have any of those things with your spouse, like the person that you are sharing your life with? And that was my life, like the last few years. I was crying a lot and I wasn't happy, and was really just pushing on because that's what I was used to doing. It's starting to rain. So I think that's the video, talking a bit about the topic of narcissism in a historic context and the myths and stories that we are forgetting, and like the everyday joy and peace and community that we used to share with other people. It's a shame that we are moving away from that and moving into because now we are a common we like the world is becoming one community almost, and we are like, all of us have an effect on people around us, and we are able to affect the people we meet every day. We have a lot of power, and when there is a shift in attitude, it's like the attitude shift, it doesn't come out there, it comes within us. So if enough people start to think that, well, abuse is just common and they just shrug their shoulders, then that's the way that society, because we are the society, then that's the way that it is being viewed. But it is actually a horrible thing, and the awareness needs to be spread about how this can play out, and that it's not only physical, it can be like the oppression can happen in other ways, and but also like the sitting down with people that we love and hanging out with them. I think that it should be like, if for us to feel good, then that should happen. That should happen now and then, that we have safe and happy people that we can trust. So we shouldn't tolerate being abused and being used and being lied to and being taken advantage of. I know of a woman whose husband like logged into her bank account and took a loan in her name and then used up the money. And she didn't even bother to report him afterwards, because it's hard, like it's a hard process to get justice, and then you have to prove it. But there is often no consequences. They get away with so lot, and we get used to it. And then when we get used to it and we think that, well, that's just the way that things are, we just have to live with it, then we accept it, and then we, like, it becomes our everyday. So we all make a choice. And I have made the choice to become a cycle breaker. I don't want to be a Sigyn. And I am also making the choice to open up and share my story openly, because I want to spread the awareness. I want to be part of the change, or I want to be part of part of the good force, like the good guys. And yes, that's it. So tell me what you think in the comments. I always answer. I like to chat with you. And I will go home now. Let's see. I think I got some enough to perhaps boil some jam, or I will check at home. Perhaps if not, I will freeze them. Anyways, okay. I'm Emma, holding up a light over the bridge. See you in the next video.